Alright folks, here's another intro video for setting up a simple rig and animating that rig with simple meshes in 3ds Max 2012. We went over it today in class, but I felt that since so many people were missing out, and this is an assignment that will be turned in on your final disk when we do complete the class, that I do at least create a video tutorial to where everybody is able to do it, get it done, understand it, and turn it in. As you can see here, I've created already the first part of the video tutorial. In fact, I've got some lights in the scene that I'll go ahead and delete. And I will go ahead and push play, and this is the final result of the first part of this video tutorial and the first part of one of 3 assignments, and that being to have the ball roll across this simple plane like you see here. Now it may look like it's very simple, a ball rolling straight across, but there are some aspects and principles that come along with how we set this up in the basic understanding of what it is you're doing, everything from the actual animation to the setting up to the adding of materials and textures to everything like that. So let's go ahead and get set up, and we will start off from scratch. So I'll just go ahead and reset everything, not to save it. I do want to reset, make some of my own personal changes here. Let's see, how do I want it to look? That looks fine. So what I'll do is I'll maximize the window. Now the first thing we need to do is set up is we're going to create a plane. Now the image plane has a specific size and a specific relationship to what we're going to be doing here. So when I created it first, I'll open the material editor, and I'm going to go ahead and make the plane a length of 90 and a width of 200. And I'm going to make sure that I center it right at 000, dead center of the world, by just right clicking on the bottom arrows here on the X, Y, and Z is already set, so that's fine. So from there I'm going to go ahead and add a material to it, and I'm going to name the material here ground. And over here in the diffuse box, I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and it's going to give me a selection. I'm going to add checker to it. Double click, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. And I'm going to hit G to turn off the grid here also. Now for the colors of the checker I have set up, I'm going to go ahead and change it just to something that's a little more aesthetically pleasing. Let's see, right about there. And the other color I'll change to a beige color. Alright, next thing we're going to want to do is create a sphere, and I'm going to turn on my edge faces on my PC here by just hitting F4, and in top view hit T, and I'm going to create the sphere right about there. And I'm going to make sure that the sphere is centered at least 0 on the y-axis here. So if it's here, I'm going to go ahead and right click on the bottom arrow on the y-axis and make sure that it is lined up with the center of the plane. So that's good. And I'm going to go ahead and put it as far out to the end as I can, so I will click F to go to front view, and just manually with no exact science needed, I'm just going to go ahead and place it towards the end. So I'll zoom in here, and right about towards the very end, as you can see, here's the ground plane, and I'm just going to go ahead and set the ball like right at the end. Back to perspective view, hit M to open my material editor again, and I'm going to create another one, another standard material, but rather than just create another one, I'm going to copy this one over to here, and where this one is named ground, this new one will be named ball. That way I already have the material here, the checker and everything, and I'm going to add it to the ball, but I'm going to go ahead and change the colors just so there is some distinction. Alright, so let's just do this, and a little bit of cool warm color. There we go. Now at this point I want to make sure that I'm going to go ahead and save this. So I'm going to go ahead and save as, and I'm going to put ball roll flat, because that's how we're going to want to do this. So we're going to do this one, we're going to have it going straight across, then we're going to do another file of it going uphill, then we're going to do another file of it going downhill, and that'll be cool. Alright, so now that I have that, I've got the ground plane, I've got the ball. The ball looks about good. The ground plane does not look good because I don't want it to be just having 4 squares with the material on here, so I'm going to click on there, the actual properties. I'm going to name it ground. Name the ball, clicking back on the ground. And I'm going to go ahead and add a UVW modifier, or UVW map. Not the unwrap, as we've gone over before. But here, when I add it to it, it's already set to plane. Now, for those of you who are using 3D Studio Max Design, as we have in the in the classroom, this right here is going to be checked for you. Real world map size. Please uncheck this. You cannot do it and continue on with what I'm about to do. So, once you've unchecked this, if it was checked, I'm going to go ahead and tile this at 5. I'm going to tile this at 2, to where the squares for the ground plane are perfectly square. From the top view, you can see. Actually, I could even go so far as to do something like 8, and I could go 5. Actually, that'd be 4, and do it like this. But I want to make sure that I have these numbers set at a specific, and that is 8 and 2. And there's a reason for that, meaning that the ball, once it rotates, if it's right on the edge here, half the distance of the ball all the way over to here till it hits one of these squares will be 360 degrees. And now you'll see that as an example here in a second. Now, as I went over in our last videos, the ones about the point helpers, I'm going to go ahead and create a point helper again by clicking on Helper, Point. I'm just going to go ahead and, I'm in top view, I'm going to create a point helper, front view here, put a box around it, and I want that box to be the size, 20. One thing I did forget is I'm going to make sure that the actual radius of the ball is 5, because 5 will equal 20 when we create a helper object. So I just line that up. Now you notice I'm just eyeballing this. It's not an exact science. In fact, it can be above it a little bit, but just to eyeball it, the only important thing is that it's at the very end of the plane here. Here's the plane, goes right towards the center of this line. That's why we add this material on here, so you can see the half of it. Now what I'm going to do is to make sure that this dummy object is centered, I want to check the y-axis, the one that makes it go this direction, and make sure it is set at 0. And I'm going to move it over to the top of the ball, zoom in a bit. Now at this point it doesn't have to be exactly lined up with the ball perfectly, but you can see eyeballing it. Let's go ahead and do this real quick so you can see a bit better. I want it to be lined up just as much as possible. There we go. As you can see, some of it's hanging out on the side over there. I'll just move it over. And over here it looks like it's good. 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 So what I'll do, back to perspective view, is I'm going to go to front view now and make sure that it is lined up. Oops, gotta be careful, you don't want to select the ball like I just did. I'm going to go ahead and put it right there and see if it is lined up enough. There we go. Now another thing I want to do is make sure that I link the actual mesh of the ball here to the actual bone object, or point helper. So in this case, since this no longer becomes a helper and it's actually going to be the bone, I'm going to name it in all caps, BONE 1. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and select the mesh of the ball. And by the way, it does not have to be an editable poly. As long as you got the size set to 5 when you created it, the radius, you're just fine. And I'm going to click up here, select and link. I'm going to click and drag, and now the ball is perfectly attached to that point helper, because when we do an animation we don't want to animate the actual mesh, we just want to animate the point help, which in this case is no longer a helper, it's just one of our driving bones here. So now you see I can rotate and the ball will rotate, and that was the reason we selected this specific material of textures, because you can see how many rotations you're actually doing visually. And it's also a good idea to make sure. Alright, I'm not sure what happened there. It was a 3ds Max crashed on me, but I'm pretty sure I know exactly where I left off just by watching the video preview I did. So what we left off on was actually the linking of the bone object here, in this case the point helper with the box around it, to the actual ball itself. And at this point we're going to go ahead and create keyframes that are going to allow us to keyframe the object and make it move from point A to point B. So with the actual bone object selected, I'm going to right click down here on the title bar, and we don't need to actually do it through position or we've got selections here to make keyframes. We've got position, rotation, and scale. So we don't need to use scale, so I'm just going to add a keyframe for rotation and position. And I'm going to click OK. And you'll notice down here at frame 0 it created a keyframe, two of them in fact, one red and one green, showing one for rotation and one for position. So now I'm going to go ahead and click on Auto Key, the shortcut for which is N on your keyboard, N as in Nancy. And I'm going to go ahead and move the slider bar all the way down to frame 100. Go to my Move tool, and I'm going to go ahead and move it all the way down towards the end. So that being the case, now this is another reason I selected the point object, because of its size and having, the cross hairs almost, you're able to see the end of the mesh. So if the more I zoom in, I want the bone object with the ball attached to go right towards the very end of the mesh. So if I were to go back to perspective view here, go back to frame 0 and hit play, which is the question mark on your keyboard, it'll actually go all the way through its cycle. Go back to frame 0, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off my edge faces. Now if you're using a PC, to turn off edge faces is F4. If you're using a Macintosh, I apologize, I'm sorry for you, but you have to hit FN, F4 or something or other. So now this also takes us to why we selected the ball to have the material it has on it. In that case being, as it goes for the first 10 frames, it reaches the end of the first square, and I'll go ahead and go to top view so you can see that. So see, within 10 frames it goes the distance of one of these squares, and at this point I want to go to my rotation tool, make sure my angle snap toggle is on. I'm going to rotate it 360 degrees right there. So as it rolls, it goes the distance of one of the cubes, a complete revolution. And I'm going to pause the video right now and just go ahead and manually, as you can see, I'll go to the next one. I'm going to pause it in a second here because it's going to take me some time to actually hand key all of these. There is a better way of doing it, but it involves going all the way to the very end and then figuring out how many revolutions are needed and rotating it all the way to the end. And it's just not productive for students who are just learning. But before I do pause this video and create all the keyframes, I'll just go ahead and show you. So as it runs through the first 20 frames, you can see it rolling. And there. Now I'll pause the video on my end, continue to do this, and it'll seem seamless. Okay, there I got all the way to the end. I keyframed every 10 keyframes. I have 360 degrees rotation. So as I rotate around and go back to perspective view, I'll hide the actual bone object here. So with it selected, I'll right click and go to hide selected and hit play, and it rolls, and everybody's happy. So that being the case, that completes this part of the tutorial. The next one we'll be doing will be having the ball roll up a hill in twice as many keyframes. Then we'll have it roll down the hill in 50 keyframes, so we'll reduce it by half from the original 100. And that completes the end of this video.